This is Urban Agriculture, episode number 14, Agritecture.
This is Urban Agriculture, episode number 14, recorded on February 24th, 2015. Hi, everybody. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and with me is Dickson Despommier. I wanted to see if you could
get that one out.
If you could wait.
I held my breath. Hello, Vincent.
How are you?
I'm very fine.
Nice day today, isn't it?
It looks good, but it doesn't feel good.
It's cold.
It's very cold. It's frigid outside. It's not just cold. It's like, you know,
I'd like to know the actual temperature.
Penguin weather.
I can tell you.
This is penguin weather.
It's sure. Beautiful blue sky, though.
Oh, yeah. Gorgeous.
And, you know, here we are on the Hudson River.
Yeah. There's no greenhouse effect.
What would the greenhouse effect be?
This would prevent radiation from the sun from bouncing back into outer space. But on a clear day, when there's no clouds, the radiation hits the surface. The albedo effect is very high. Why? Because it's white.
Albedo?
Albedo. I knew albedo. I went to school with him.
It's -7.
-7 degrees Celsius.
Which is below freezing, Dixon.
It's very below freezing.
You got that?
Yeah. So we have a nice looking day, but it's a very cold day out there.
We also have a guest.
We do.
Right here.
Actually, I would call him an old friend.
In the vertical farm.
And a former student, actually, of
Dixon,
this science.
Sometime we should do a podcast in a vertical farm.
Oh, no question.
Why not?
No question. Mm-hmm. No question.
And there you heard his voice. You're a former student, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, one of my former students, but I wasn't his major professor, let's put it this way.
All right, we'll explore this. Let's tell everyone who he is. He's Henry Gordon Smith from the website agritecture.com. Welcome.
Hi, Vince. How's it going?
Good.
Gordon, good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you.
Where do you hang out? In New York?
In New York, where do I hang out? I like Fat Cat in the West Village.
You live in New York.
I called you Gordon just now, but I meant to say Henry.
It's okay. It's a English name, so double-barreled last name.
But
First name Henry.
You live here in
Gordon
the city.
Smith.
Right.
I live in New York City.
You were born and raised here?
No. My father's a civil engineer, so we moved around a lot. I was born in Hong Kong.
Wow.
I grew up there till I was 6.
Does that mean that he doesn't use any foul language? Or when you say civil engineer, I just wondered what they meant by that, that's all.
He's English. He's fairly restrained. It depends on where they're
So he's from the UK originally?
He's from the UK, yeah. I don't sound it because I went to American schools.
Yeah, you're not at all.
But I'm actually not American at all.
Mm-hmm. You're not. You have a UK passport?
Yeah, I have
a citizen of the world.
Yeah, one of those.
Where'd you go to college?
My undergrad degree was in University of British Columbia in Canada.
Oh, nice. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. Sure.
What did you major in?
I majored in political science.
Isn't that on the island of Vancouver?
Sorry?
Is that on the island of Vancouver?
It's actually not on the island. It's on one of the peninsulas just in Vancouver City. So Vancouver Island's off.
Okay.
So I majored in political science, and I thought I was going to be a diplomat. I learned several languages when I was younger, and I thought that's what I was going to do. And
do you still remember those languages?
Yeah.
Which did you learn? Chinese?
No. It was. It's quite a long story. We don't want to make it about my background necessarily, but when I was 10, we moved to Germany, and I learned German. I went to German school there. My mother's Czech, so I speak fluent Czech, and I would work in the summer times in Spain. So my Spanish is quite good.
Did you say something in Czech?
Ano, co bych chtěl, bych jsem říkal. Já můžu říkat, že to je krásný den tady, ale je to tam moc zima venku.
How about Schmutzdecke? Do you know what that means?
Vince,
that's German.
It is. But if Chuck Knirsch listens to this podcast, he will understand.
He speaks Czech.
He does. Actually, his father is from Czechoslovakia.
That's cool. Well, he was cursing at you,
Yeah. Well, I understood every word he said.
So we have some on our other podcast. We use Schmutzdecke, which is the stuff at the bottom of the pond.
That's right.
I don't know if you knew that.
It's also a layer in the sedimentation process for sewage treatment. That's where I learned that term. The Decke is a layer. That means layer in German. And Schmutz, of course, everybody knows what that means.
Schmutz.
Yeah. So Schmutzdecke is there.
What other languages do you know? French, Italian?
And a little bit of English.
No, my French is really quite bad. Some Italian and a little bit of Russian. I graduated high school in Russia.
Oh, wow.
Wow. In Moscow?
Moscow, yeah.
He's got an international guy here.
Indeed.
That's impressive.
Indeed.
So you graduated from BC hoping to be a diplomat, but I guess you weren't.
Yeah, it was, that's really where all of this started. I had an internship with the International Organization for Migration, and I was very passionate about it, very excited to make a difference. But I found that the public sector was really slow. I couldn't...
it still is, but...
I couldn't quite make the impact I wanted to. It wasn't the kind of go-getter environment I wanted. It wasn't entrepreneurial. And so I said, oh, great, now what am I going to do? I have this political science degree, and I really want to go into business. And it was just in the nick of time as I opened my mind to it. I discovered urban agriculture. I was doing a environmental security course and studying why nation states act the way that they do. And one of the requirements, one of the course challenges was to do a report on like a city and kind of some of the environmental security challenges there. So I did Vancouver, and I studied urban agriculture and why such a quote unquote crunchy, right, hipster city doesn't have urban or vertical farms everywhere. And I just got very obsessed with the subject. I discovered that there were waiting lists for the community gardens of 2 years on average. Wow. And that was the same in Toronto, the same in Montreal, the same in Seattle. So something was wrong there. Something was missing. So I wanted to understand if maybe there was a technological fix.
What year was this roughly?
So I graduated... it was probably 2009.
When did you publish
2008.
Vertical?
2010.
And when did your class develop the idea?
1999.
All right, so this had been around for a while.
Yeah, but I mean, it didn't emerge into the light of day until around 2003, 2004, something like that. But we met here.
Yeah, we met at Columbia.
So you're going to get to that part, I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get there pretty quickly. Do you want me to continue with that?
So you took this course, you did a paper on urban farming in Vancouver, right?
Right.
And so with soil-based farming, there are benefits, obviously, with both the green infrastructure benefits and especially the community benefits, right? People can engage with it. It's a very public and exposed space. But the productive element isn't there. It's not producing a lot of food. So that's when I discovered hydroponics. And I started kind of sketching greenhouses or on rooftops or what I call buildings that grow food, agritecture. And I just started sketching those out and imagining them. And then I started researching online who's doing this already, if anyone. And I discovered Bright Farms at first, who at the time was a very, very progressive in their building integrated agriculture and in exploring new methodologies for integrating food into structures. And kind of realized that I wasn't the first person to think of this and started just gathering that content online and in an online research repository, which was then the blog, Agritecture. So
when did you start that?
Yeah, that was I guess probably 3.5 years ago was when I started it. Just got a Tumblr account and just started sharing it. Really the intention wasn't to necessarily build a following, but to just kind of create this one-stop shop where I could go and get all of the designs that inspired me, all the businesses that we're doing. And it wasn't just the designs, right? I wanted the businesses as well. What were the business models and the different approaches that people were taking? So then that continued, and I finished my undergraduate degree, and I decided, I needed something. I wanted to go for this. And so I needed something to kind of accent that degree or add to it. So I found this, there's a food security research center at Ryerson University in Toronto, and they do online courses in urban agriculture, a 6-course certificate in food security and urban agriculture. So I went for it, and I did 3 courses in it, and one of the challenges was very exciting. It was an assignment to design a city block that fed itself. So then I really started to dig into aquaponics and hydroponics and kind of the numbers behind this. How can we really get to the point where cities or city blocks or buildings can produce significant enough food to make an impact? And I was always excited by that mixture between the data behind production and the architectural, challenge and excitement of bringing food into cities. I took that project, which was very basic, and I just submitted it to Bright Farms. And I said, look, I'm really excited about this, and I would really love to have an internship or a job or anything. I'm looking for work. And they liked the idea, and they said, if you can make your way to New York, you can have an interview with us. So I bought a one-way ticket. And and I I came to New York,
Gutsy.
and my brother was here at the time, so I was able to kind of crash on his couch for a little bit. Very nervously went to this meeting at Bright Farms. It was so exciting. In their office, they had these sketches of vertical farms and vertical facades and greenhouses on supermarkets, things that seemed unattainable at the time, and I wanted to be part of that. I didn't have the right set of skills for the job at the time, and so I didn't get it. But I knew that New York was a place I wanted to be. I knew that I had a good feeling about this subject. So I stuck around. I had some social media marketing experience, so I began doing consulting to kind of wealthy women wanting to self-publish books and things like that to survive. And then discovered the sustainability management program at Columbia. And I said, this is it. This is a way for me to get my visa to stay in the United States, and also to begin to get a reputable degree that I could take to market and get a job with it. So it was a long process. It wasn't for a young person. I felt like it was a lot of risk, and it was very scary at the time. But I really, there was this passion that was brewing, and it just continued. So zoom up forward. I'm in my second semester, I think, of the master's program in sustainability management, and I of course saw Dickson's work in The Economist, his write-up, his book. I started to be exposed to it, and his name. He was really part of the internet phenomena that I was also leveraging through my blog. So there was this direct connection between what we both felt as far as an interest in communicating this subject to inspire others to get involved with it. So I pursued Dickson pretty aggressively, and then designed a course. I think we called it Challenges in Vertical Farming. That was a
tutorial.
A tutorial, yeah. Dickson was my advisor, and we would come up here and work. And the challenge was to begin to bring the data and the design together. What would a vertical farm that feeds 2,500 people, for example, really look like?
You used to come up here and meet with him out there, right?
Exactly right.
You sat in the corner and you guys would talk.
You got it.
Why weren't you part of the sustainability program, Dickson?
I was.
You're not sustainable?
No. I had a student.
So he brought you into it, basically.
Well, we were, you can call it what you like. Not in terms of a formal connection, but I think the whole time I was teaching this subject on medical ecology, which the second half of which was the work on the vertical farm, that's sustainable development.
Yeah.
I think I would have called it that if I had thought hard enough about it, but thank goodness it dovetailed in with what Henry was doing.
But they allowed you to design a tutorial with Dickson and be part of your program, right?
Exactly. So I was focused on elements of architecture, the built environment in the program, and then elements of food and water. That's what I knew what I wanted to do from the beginning. But there were limitations, right? I didn't have the freedom to design a vertical farm for a project.
Yeah.
It had to fit in some constraints that I wasn't really happy with. So this is another message to all you young people interested in getting involved in this. Look at your
young person.
Look at your school. I guess I'm still fairly young.
Very young.
But find a way to at Columbia it's called an independent study, but to create your own program.
Yeah.
And most schools will be excited to have that. And so that's what I was able to do. And Dickson was kind enough to be.
How long were you working with Dickson on this?
Yeah, it was
a year.
About a year.
Yeah.
And what was the output of this interaction?
A charrette. We had a charrette, and the charrette was held at, I think it was held at the Earth Institute, if I recall right. And it was by invitation. And Henry invited a whole mess of people that I had never met before. You show up and you say, who are you? And you start introducing yourself around, and this is how you make new friends. And you learn about the network that he has established. So the one thing I learned most about Henry, besides the fact that he's a brilliant off-the-books thinker, out of the box, he didn't make a box, was that he can draw people together in a single space that he knows everybody here will have something in common with everybody else, but you just don't know that yet. It's like inviting people to a cocktail party, and you can plan this for years in advance almost. And that was a fantastic end to the beginning of his educational experience, and now he's into the application phase. And his reveal was quite wonderful because it invited questions afterwards. Also, it was almost like a defense of a thesis, but it was at a master's level.
Got it.
But it was much higher in quality than a typical master's thesis. I must say that if you could have done that in the architecture school, someone in the audience would have volunteered to help you build it.
Well, I didn't invite the right people.
So did you write a document that
we're going to
Dixon,
put that up on this podcast.
I mean, Dickson gave me the challenge. He said, it needs to be accessible, right? It needs to be easy to understand. I was looking to kind of write this big thing, but Dickson didn't have that requirement. It was really about how do we communicate this? How do we kind of get this out there? So it ended up being, I think, a 6-page brief where I outline what's called the Bronx Vertical Farm, BX VF. If you search it online, you can find it. It's a farm that's took the data, the academic data from NASA, University of Ohio,
a lot of metrics,
and tried to formed it together in a structure to think about
to make it real.
Right. And then I took the USDA MyPlate diet, which is the evolution of the pyramid, and that defined the vegetarian diet. And then I looked at how we could produce enough food indoors to feed 2,500 people a full vegetarian diet every day. Because that was really the question for me. If we're looking to the future of these cities, how are we going to have structures that actually, are producing meals and food for people that is interesting and tasty and has a variety of it in it. But going back to that, presentation I did and the people I invited, a big part of that was a little bit of frustration with the closed-mindedness in the industry at the time, and that was because I had gathered a list of all the vertical and urban farms, greenhouses, things like that around the world that were doing the work that I thought had the data I needed. And I simply emailed all of them twice, about 100.
My recommendation, by the way.
Yes.
How many responses did you get?
I got 0 responses.
Exactly.
0 responses from these companies. All I asked for was, what's the size of your farm and what's the kind of yield per square foot for, say, lettuce or something, just to get an idea to kind of benchmark, because the academic data it's detached from kind of the business element. It's detached from the architectural element. So then I invited some of these companies to the final presentation, and there was a moment of chastising, but it was exciting because we were able to.
Some of them came.
Some of them came, yeah, and I was very happy to hear that.
Right.
And that's that's a great sign. But it was originally the vision for that project was, imagine if you had a light manufacturing space, which the empty lot was zoned for that in New York City, and the city got evolved enough to recognize that these spaces would be ideal for vertical farms or plant factories, as they call them in Japan. What would that look like, and how could you get enough variety in there where it's not just producing lettuce? So I imagine that you would actually lease out that space to various companies. So if this company's great at tomatoes, then they get that space. This company's great at microgreens, they get that space. And that's kind of the complex that develops. And that's where I really wanted the company data, because I actually wanted to, on the final design, to highlight, Aero Farms, this floor, Bright Farms, this floor.
Eurofresh.
All of the different parts.
What year was that again?
Oh, so that was 2013, yeah. May
2013. So there were several operational vertical farms up and running by that time. And a lot of them in Japan that we hadn't heard about yet.
Yeah, those I hadn't.
And this was after the book came out, and they were still reluctant to share their data. I mean, it's like one lab asking another, how did you do these plaque assays? Well, we just throw the virus on there and
of course.
hope for the best. You can read about it in the paper that I'll publish.
Did you publish this paper that you mentioned, 6-page?
Yeah, it is.
Is it on your website, Agritecture?
Yeah, it's definitely on the website, Agritecture. Okay. But if you search BX Vertical Farm or BXVF, and Agritecture, you should find it on Scribd. It's a public reading site. Let me know if you find it.
Sure.
If not, I'll publish it very soon, so it's on the front again.
We'll tag it onto this podcast. If you'd like.
Yeah,
I'd like to link to it so people can read it. Yeah, it doesn't show up on the first Google page.
Okay. I'll have to work on that.
It has to be rewatered.
But yes, it's public, and you can check it out. And I think that there's actually the open field agriculture data from the FAO compared to indoor agriculture data in a table. Yeah. So I definitely I'm not a maths guy necessarily. I try to bring these elements together, so I'm open to feedback and improvements upon that, certainly.
The word agritecture, did you invent that, or had that been around?
I coined it.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I'm the one who took it to the bank and have pushed it.
And where did you?
I did find later on the High Line actually used it in some of their promotional documents.
Wow.
So
the High Line being that railway in New York, Lower New York, right?
Exactly. That has been converted to kind of a public garden space. So, and
when you coined the word, what were you thinking? I mean, I know, but tell us,
So right now it's agritecture.com, but it used to be agri-texture. So I was just thinking architecture and agriculture combined, and I actually searched just texture as a separate word and agri as a separate word as far as their roots, and found that it really did.
No pun intended. Sorry, I always think of these crazy,
Don't apologize, Dickson. We love you for it. So it just evoked what I was interested in, which was buildings that grow food. I was always interested in the mixed use vertical farms and the capacity for vertical farming to kind of ignite this interest in agriculture that's been lost, that I feel I've lost, right, through growing up in Hong Kong and Tokyo. Yeah. I couldn't be more disconnected from food production, and because it inspired me, I thought that name kind of evokes. It's exciting. It's technology meets nature in the urban enviment.
I like it. It's a good name. I noticed there's a agritecture.org. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, no, that's he's an architect, I believe. Yeah.
Well, there's the page is offline, but if it does show up in a Google search, but it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Do you have training as an architect at all?
I don't. You don't? I don't. Yeah. I always wanted to be an architect, but I don't have training as an architect. No.
So you continue to maintain agritecture.com.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The tagline is your source for vertical farming and urban agriculture news, business, jobs, and design. Mm-hmm. But this probably doesn't pay the bills, right? What do you do for a living?
Yeah, so right now I'm after one of the companies that was looking at hiring me came to that final presentation, and it was Blue Planet Environmental. It's a water technology company that has patented technologies that clean water, one for outdoor water bodies and one for reservoirs. One application we were particularly looking at was how nanobubbles could improve the delivery of oxygen in vertical systems and hydroponic systems. So that's our HydroBloom product. So they recruited me, and they were interested in my languages and the capacity to kind of take the company and the product globally. After starting with the company, we learned that we really need to do some more proof of concept testing in North America. So that was very exciting. I got to visit a lot of greenhouses and a lot of aquaponics operations, and to see how water played a role and aeration played a role in these systems. And that's what I was really excited about the job, is I wanted to get to know these technologies more intimately, and know the businesses and the growers and what their needs are, so I could be a better designer, really, long term. Yeah. So that's what I do now for Blue Planet, and it's been very exciting. And we have 2 greenhouses of our own in upstate New York that we actually do some R&D, but we also sell product to the local market. So we have a tomato greenhouse, hydroponic, and a horizontal NFT Leafy Greens greenhouse. We also have a vertical microgreens operation, which is a growing startup business, in this realm. It's really pretty easy to do in your garage or anywhere like that.
Yeah, the last fellow, Dan Albert, right?
Yes, exactly.
Talked about microgreens.
Sure. Henry, have you taken any of these available courses that are offered through the University of Arizona, like, say, for instance, from Gene Giacomelli?
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, it's always been about getting more depth and knowledge of the subject. So I went to a short course last summer.
You had done that, so.
At the University of Arizona.
So you're not exactly a novice at this.
Well, I mean, you have to work at it. You have to save your pennies and invest in yourself. And this is an emerging industry. So, that's what I wanted to do. And I'm also lucky now to have a company that sees the value in that. And so I can get them to help me out with some things. So it was a great course, that one.
Gentle, yet aggressively seeking educational person with passion for learning that I've ever met, to be honest with you.
I think it's a good combination.
It's a fantastic combination.
Many people are aggressive, but they're not so nice.
No, but he's not that not that kind of aggressive. If he hears about an opportunity that he thinks he can really use, he goes off and does it. He just doesn't say he'll do it.
You have to go for it. You have to go for it. My mom taught me that.
So what's the name of your company that you're working with now?
It's Blue Planet Environmental.
Okay, so it's a consulting basically company?
So now it's shifted into consulting, and that's the division I lead now. So now we offer, which I'm just so excited about it. We offer benchmarking studies for vertical farming. So to know all the vertical farms in the world, how many layers they are, how many jobs they have, estimated revenue. We actually even go into some analysis on kind of the trends in vertical farming, where it's going. So that's, great for companies that are looking to kind of do feasibility studies, which is the next stage of what we offer, where whether it's in Canada or the US, anywhere really, Singapore, a lot of the hot areas for vertical farming, how can you know if it's the right time to enter and how to enter appropriately more is the bigger question.
Right.
We do a little bit of design. We're not an architecture firm, so we typically work with architects. So right now, most of our work is school greenhouses and vertical microgreens businesses, and then feasibility studies for business planning. A tip focused on vertical farming, that last part.
And they're located here in the city?
Blue Planet, or the projects.
Blue Planet.
Yeah, so we're in Midtown. Yeah, and as I said, we have our farms upstate New York. So I feel what that company offers, what we offer, and is really this holistic approach. We're not just growers. We have the growers that can validate the data and the kind of bold designs that we come up with. And then we actually have an economic model that we test the data in.
There's a Blue Planet grill, but that's not you, right?
No.
It's not yet. blueplanetenviro.com. And we're working on a new consulting page for this growing futures division that we're developing.
You have a Canadian branch?
Yeah. That's where our R&D is in outside
Ontario.
Toronto.
So there's yet another side to Henry.
I know.
Which I take some credit for, actually, because when I was on one of my sojourns to Europe to give a talk at, believe it or not, of a dairy industry manufacturer who manufactures equipment for dairy farmers. This was held in a small town called Den Bosch. Well, Den Bosch also happens to be the town that houses the headquarters for Plant Lab. So at this meeting, I was the only one talking about indoor farming at this one, and I was kind of like a flyer, basically. Most of the people there were either dairy farmers or suppliers to the dairy industry for milking machines and stalls for cattle and all kinds of green initiatives and how to recycle the poo and how to and to get more energy out of it, that sort of thing. So, but I had the privilege of being driven to the meeting each day from the hotel by the president of that company. So we got a chance to talk about a lot of things. And at that meeting, I met a guy his name is Max Loessel, and why he was there I have no idea whatsoever. He's a young guy just like Henry, and he looks at me and he says, I know all about your work, and I just want to be involved in this. Somehow I want to make vertical farming happen. He says, what should I do? I said, well, why don't you make a blog first, and then why don't you form an association? Why don't you just say, we're going to be the Vertical Farm Association? Now, nobody else has done that yet, so maybe that'll work. And by the way, you should probably meet this other guy that I know about. His name is Henry Gordon Smith, and he's in the States, but he's got similar passion for this idea. After I'd talked with him for maybe an hour, I thought it was. Maybe it could have been shorter time than this, but it seemed like we had covered a lot of ground in a very short period of time. Well, take it, Henry. Tell him what happened next.
Yeah, I mean, it was really exciting. And I think a really exciting story for inspiring others to get involved and to collaborate on this. So yeah, Max was interning at Plant Lab at the time, I believe.
That's right.
And he did it. He went for just what you said. And he's
just like Henry. He did it.
He started the Association for Vertical Farming, and it's a nonprofit association that's global and whose goal is to kind of get more transparent data on the subject of vertical farming and actually to do events for youth and professionals, which we'll talk a little bit about those workshops later, to inspire others and give them really the leapfrogging capacity they need to get involved in the industry. So the Association of Vertical Farming has done the first map of vertical farms around the world.
That's too
much. Let's go back to the story.
When did you meet Max?
So then you just introduced me to Max, or Max reached out to me.
When did that happen?
And that was
2 years ago, maybe.
Oh, not even maybe a year. Yeah, almost maybe a year and 8 months ago. Max and I start working together online, and he says building association.
I just exchanged emails. Next thing you know,
and I've worked with a lot of great people, but never have I had such an instant work chemistry.
And he's multi-language also.
Multilingual as well. Yeah, Max also lived in China for a little while, so we have some connection with that.
And he's very unassuming, just like Henry. And these two guys got together. So this is like 2 + 2 equal 1 + 1 equals 100. Yeah, because what happened next after that was phenomenal.
So we just hit the ground running and just really tried to connect with all the vertical farming companies and also the consultancies and the technologies for them, and build a membership where we can add value to those members and connect them with each other.
Exactly.
Individuals can join the association as well, and be part of events and get discounts. And really, it's really the one network for this subject, solely focused on vertical farming. People who are excited about moving the industry forward and sharing ideas.
Yeah.
And we're very happy to see how it's grown, but we really need more people, even more people to get involved, because this has to be global. It's too big of a challenge for it not to be interdisciplinary, intergenerational, and intercontinental, in my opinion.
So Henry had lunch with me just today, and 2 other gentlemen wanted to have lunch with me several weeks ago, and they couldn't make it, and the weather conspired to postpone our lunch. Yeah. And they said, well, what about, Tuesday of next week? And I said, sure, that's fine. So then Henry called me up and says, well, what are we going to do before the podcast? I said, well, why don't we just go over in Coogan's and have lunch? So we just did that, right?
Yeah, we did.
So who were those 2 people?
Yeah, well, they were...
Speaking of serendipity.
Yeah, I mean, they were a very intelligent pair of a construction architect, and then the other young man, he was a business... International affairs.
The job you originally wanted.
Yeah, well, everybody converts eventually, right?
And what are they doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there'll be a reveal on Agritecture coming, when they're ready. But they're taking the shipping container model.
What did you just generalize first?
Just generalize.
These are 2 guys out of the blue that just asked to have lunch with me. I had no idea of what they were going to talk about. I mean,
you must have had some idea. Come on.
No, they sent me some emails, and I barely read them, and I barely paid attention. But the moment Henry hit the table and we started to talk, I just sat there and listened, because they're involved in a startup company to take shipping containers, these international shipping containers, and outfit them with all of the things you'd need to construct around them an indoor, vertically raised farm.
Yeah, there are lots of these lying around, aren't there?
Incredible.
Have you driven by the turnpike?
We'll talk about
they're stacked
that.
up like
they're huge.
stories and stories. They're just sitting right by the railroad yards.
That's right. So at lunch today, we were regaled by these 2 guys to tell us how they were planning on using those shipping containers to jumpstart a vertical farm industry along those lines. So they're going to be on this show sometime in the future. I mean,
it's really exciting because, Dickson, when we were here talking, we had a list of everyone doing it, now we can't keep up.
I can't keep up.
Now we can't keep up. It's
out there, as they would say. It's out there.
These entrepreneurs and these ideas are popping up everywhere. That's it's
your fault.
It's your fault, Dickson. It's your fault. No. It's your fault because I was doing a workshop.
Okay, it's our fault.
I was doing a workshop at the Thought for Food conference last weekend in Lisbon, which is an excellent conference for all of you interested in youth engagement and food security. But in it, I was talking about food, imagining food utopias, and how your book, and its vision of the future and the vertical farms inspired this whole internet trend, and therefore it's exponential technology embodied right in that story itself. And you can see on Google Trends, if you look up vertical farming, when Dickson's book launches, and suddenly how the search traffic for that subject increases. And I think that's a really interesting symbol of the power of ideas to actually come to reality. Because the ideas of a greenhouse on a supermarket, that was utopian. It's real now. Gotham Greens in Brooklyn. Right. The idea of warehouses with vertical farms in the U.S., that's real. Green Spirit Farms, Green Sense Farms, farmed here.
That's it.
The idea of facade vertical farms, MIT City Farm is doing it, and we have this Expo 2015 in Milan, and James Bieber.
The U.S. government will be doing it.
The U.S. government is doing it on it. So, there's nothing is impossible.
That's right. Well, I think the students that contributed to the idea, which hopefully the book champions, that's their concepts, just in my words, but it's their ideas too. It couldn't be stopped once we started to work on this. There was no way to stop it until you've done it to show that it either works or it doesn't. So it's like doing a grand experiment. And right now we're doing a grand experiment. Yeah, look at all those boxes waiting to get used.
I guess they made too many. I tell you, I drive by these every day in Elizabeth, New Jersey. They are so high. If you search, people want to sell them.
Of course they do.
And they say you can use them for so many things.
Exactly.
Because they're waterproof and tight and all that.
And they're very strong because
so they made too many, I guess, and now they want to repurpose them, right?
Well,
Perhaps.
they ship them and then they don't necessarily want to ship them back, right?
Exactly.
If there isn't
Not
a product,
empty, at
there's,
least.
it's the trade market isn't equal, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So,
yeah, it's
okay,
true.
then
We don't export anything.
there's yet another side to Henry.
Mm-hmm.
And that relates very much to this association that was set up. So, Henry, please
the Vertical
tell us.
Farm Association, is it?
Please tell us.
Of which you are a member, I see.
Yeah.
Oh, but of course.
Dixon's a board member on it,
Absolutely.
and we're very happy to have him to engage in the events and
And they're asking me to do things like judge. Well, please.
the workshops. Yeah, so it's the
What about
Association
the
for Vertical
workshops?
Farming, and it's vertical-farming.net.
Mm-hmm.
So, Max and I were brainstorming, right? How can we create some exciting new events and engage people? And I said, well, what we really need is we need professionals. We need new professionals to get interested in the subject, ones that aren't already interested in it. So, that's when we came up with these workshops, and we call them hello. We call them the Agritecture Workshops, and basically it's my vision of what an interdisciplinary team would be to develop a vertical farm. So there's an architect, a hydroponic grower, an engineer, a marketing professional, an entrepreneur, and then a sustainability manager. Because I think that sustainability considerations need to be part of this throughout. We can't just guarantee that every vertical farm is going to be sustainable. So we have to really approach it in that way. So this was the idea, and we recruited 3 teams of 6 professionals and partnered them with some students, and we did it at the Earth Institute in December, and had this
Which is at Columbia for the listeners.
Columbia,
I'm not familiar with
it's a research institute at Columbia.
That's right.
In Earth Sciences.
Yeah.
And they basically had one day. It's a design charrette idea. They had one day to come up with a concept urban farm that would fit the context of New York City. That's a big part of the challenge. And they had to present like a draft business plan, some marketing ideas. They had to have an estimate of the yield. You can't just design things without yield anymore. It's those days are done. We need to actually know what it's producing, how much.
Right.
And again, sustainability considerations. And I was blown away. Dixon was a judge for it. We also had Esther Dyson join us.
I was
Mike Gould from
stunned
Texas
at the
A&M.
quality. Stunned.
And it was so incredible to see how they came together as a team and developed this in such a short time. And what was interesting, I thought, was that there were vertical elements, but most of it was focused on greenhouses that were connected to structures and had synergies between the space, which is very much what's happening in New York City as far as this industry right now with Gotham Greens and Bright Farms and the various companies getting in on that, or Sky Vegetables, of course, in the South Bronx.
Yep.
So that was exciting that the context was met. So now we're doing it again in Las Vegas.
Didn't
sorry.
Max also have one in Munich?
Well, we had an info day. Yeah, so
An
it's another
info day. The one I couldn't make, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But,
So another thing what the association does is we try to engage policy makers. So the info days are basically we invite public that have no awareness to vertical farming at all, and then we also invite city leaders. And then we bring in experts to present on the subject, and the goal is again to inspire and to have the city leaders see how kind of novices to the industry, what questions they ask, what concerns they have, and how they're answered by the experts in the room, right? Like what happens to the small scale farmer, or isn't soil better, and things like that.
Right.
And we have board members. In that case, it was Jasper Den Besten from Den Haas University, who was able to answer a lot of those questions, and so that was great, and also that a different format, but part of the engagements we do. So we're having another workshop in Las Vegas.
You're off next week too.
To the Global Forum for Innovations in Agriculture in Abu Dhabi. That's where Max and I met the first time.
That's true.
Yeah, so we worked together for like 8 months, and then we met there for the first time. Unbelievable. And this year, the association is doing an edible cities component, a whole section of the event that's focused on urban agriculture. So we're tirelessly working at it.
Do you ever want to own one of these someday?
That's a good question.
I always ask you that, and you give me different answers every time I ask you.
I mean, certainly it would be exciting to have a space where you could really understand the management challenges of a vertical farm, to own and operate it.
Where would you do that?
right now, I would do it in Newark, definitely in New Jersey.
Yeah,
it's
Newark.
all about New Jersey right now. in my
Newark,
opinion.
there's space there. There's good old.
Yeah, I think there's space. I think there's warehouses. I think
Lots of containers.
I think you have access to the market without some of the risks and costs of New York City. And I think that's what it's about. You have to find the sweet spot. So I mean, I'd be interested in that. But honestly, right now, I'm still. I have some concerns I'm still exploring. For example, the worker environment. Right, there's this focus on automation or kind of not enough production. That's kind of what you have to choose. I really want to discover where the balance is between the two. Where can we create meaningful green jobs around the city in vertical farms, but also have them be highly productive, economically feasible? There's got to be somewhere in between.
Well, there is.
Those two, yeah.
So there's a new one that's being built right now in Jackson, Wyoming, called Vertical Harvest, and we're familiar with it because one of our colleagues right here lives in Jackson and keeps us informed as to what's happening. And in fact, the architect that designed it is the architect that designed his house in Jackson as well.
Wow.
So we have a connection there. And so that, you know who they're hiring to work in that farm?
I know, but why don't you tell us?
No, Henry, please. This is about you. Tell us who they're doing. You're calling about jobs.
Yeah, I mean, they have, mentally challenged youth.
They call them developmentally
challenged.
challenged people. So
that's who they will hire to work in that farm.
Correct. And
who's building who designed it? Do you know? Not your firm, right?
We know.
It's a great project. Yeah.
In fact, there was a city post. I forget the name of the website, but they had a huge write-up on it. They had lots of pictures.
Partially funded from a Kickstarter. Some part of it raised,
which
is great. Yeah, and I'm
they
sure
got a grant from the state of Wyoming, and then they got contributions from donors that prefer to remain anonymous. But our colleague next door was one of them. Oh. And they got about half of what they needed.
Can we go out there and?
We're going to go out there.
And we'll stay at his place.
We're going to stay at his place, and we'll go to the opening. Come on, we should go to the opening.
Definitely.
Because it's going to be fabulous.
Opening,
it's going to be a demonstration project as to what's possible.
And it's
even in the most affluent vacation community in the world, there's a need for this. And by the way, they've already sold all their produce.
What are they selling?
They haven't even opened yet.
It's not going to be a microgreen thing, right?
No, it's some of it.
I'm sure they'll have some of it.
They'll have mixed uses for all kinds of produce.
Depends on the variety. Is it going to be aquaponics?
Hydroponics, and I don't know if they're going to have fish or not. I can't actually say. You said aquaponics. I thought you meant aeroponics. I'm not certain.
I haven't seen that.
I'm starting to learn the words, Dickson.
Soon you and I will open one.
No, and that's an exciting project. And there's some criticism of it online. And I just
really,
I've also engaged in the conversation.
What was the nature of that?
Well, it was like, this is Jackson, Wyoming. There's plenty of space, right? Build a greenhouse. Don't build a vertical farm. Right? This is a waste of money. And that really upsets me because I get it. You need to look at the challenge holistically. But we are in a looming crisis, whether it's a water crisis or, food security crisis. And we really need more resilient systems. And if we don't have pilot projects like these to learn about how people work in these spaces, how these systems function, it's going to be very difficult for us to have, autonomous cities in the future. And so I firmly support those kinds of pilot projects, especially at this stage.
There's plenty of room for everybody.
So it's a 3-story building on a 30 by 150 foot lot.
Exactly.
So it's a very narrow, long
It is narrow.
lot.
And it's built next to a parking lot down in the downtown district.
Yeah, public parking garage.
Unused space anyway. It's not.
Have you been to Jackson?
Model, which is interesting.
Yeah, but I do a lot of fishing out west. So I've driven through Jackson.
I've never been. The downtown, it's smaller than Newark, I presume.
It's a lot smaller than Newark. Yeah, sure. It's gift shops, art galleries, and restaurants.
Okay.
With 1 or 2 gas stations, and that's about it. And in the outskirts of town, there's a big shopping center, but it's not in the middle of town. And then there's a community of residents that are on the other side of town. And it's primarily for people that come out west that want to see the Teton Mountains.
Sure.
The Snake River or Yellowstone Park, and that's a perfect entry point for all of those things.
I think it's interesting that they're doing this in that kind of setting.
Oh, I think it's great.
Who was the idea behind this?
Well, I think it depends on who you ask, but I think that our neighbor next door in the next office building, since his architect was involved with his house, he just sort of dropped the bomb on them. To say, oh, by the way, have you ever heard of vertical farming? And I think the next thing they did was...
It's very funny because he was highly critical for a long time.
Absolutely, and rightly so. And rightly so, because he's a pragmatist. And, if it's not practical, it's not worth investing in it because you're going to lose your shirt unless you need to lose money. There are some situations where that's true, but this is not one of those. So they're going to make money on this.
So will we have one eventually in Newark, do you think?
Well, I mean, Aero Farms is developing one.
They're already there.
They're already there,
which is very exciting because they have what seems to be a very well-performing technology. They've tested in schools, and aeroponics has the potential to be 20-30% more productive. So
Dickson, we should go there.
I love it. They're taking an unused dance club, and
we're going to definitely go there. There's no question.
I think we should do all the local vertical farms.
Let's do them all. Forget local. Let's do them all.
Yeah,
I would like to spend like 2 months in Japan just touring all those plant factories.
What's the one in Pennsylvania?
We need to do that. Yeah,
there's one
Green Spirit Farms.
Green Spirit Farms was going into Pennsylvania, but they're not.
Sorry.
You said there was one in Scranton.
There was. They had a deal. They almost did it, and then it
fell through.
It did fall through. But Green Spirit, and we've had those on our podcast already.
Green Spirit is Michigan, no?
Dan and Milan, New Buffalo.
Yeah, we had Green
a lot
Spirit.
Of locations.
That's right.
We should do all these local guys.
We got to do it. We just
in Wyoming,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. But the biggest reason for doing them, as Henry mentions, is the fact that in most places, temperate zone climate, you got a winter. Without winter, then you can't make this argument as strongly as you could, unless you start to look at plant diseases.
Well, what about water?
Rice blast
what about lack of water,
blast.
Dixon? You could do this in California.
Lack of water.
The lack of water is a those are the two things. I mean, it was the yield at the beginning that excited me back at those UBC days when I was looking at this soil-based lot, and I discovered you could grow 10 times per square foot in the space.
Right.
It's like we have to find a way to make that work.
Or more.
Well, that's the minimum. Based on the data we tested, it was like that's what you can assume.
Thousands times more.
Absolutely,
according to NASA
with aeroponics and NASA's data, which there's some, but yes, you can have enormous amounts. But that's why we need data from the companies.
That's right.
To kind of validate, academic data that's coming around.
I have a different take than you do because
we can disagree sometimes. Dixon.
We're not disagreeing. We're complementing, because I think the university system of the world, but primarily of the United States, has been a marvelous source of information for both technology and for agriculture. So this is an agri-technology company that you're looking at here. So insinuate the playgrounds, the research playgrounds in agricultural schools, like eco-laboratory, for instance. If you could just make eco-laboratories available to, let's say, UC Davis, Penn State, University of Michigan. We can go on. We have a big list of these places where they would be absolutely fantastic to turn students loose in and to hook them up with the tech schools, like MIT and Caltech and NJIT, for instance, which is one of those below the radar screen but very, very, very accomplished technology school, highly recognized. In fact, their basketball team actually beat the University of Michigan this year. How did that happen? Because no one had ever heard of NJIT before that, but they should have, because they're partnered with the city of Newark. That's their job, is to technology lead Newark into the future. So, and they're very interested in this idea. And then you have a campus of Rutgers University in that same city. You've got 2 state schools vying for state monies. To put eco-laboratory in the middle of those 2 schools and watch them go to work would be great.
My son goes to Stevens Tech.
Yes, he does.
Right?
That's right.
He said some of the students did an urban farming project.
Oh, that's great.
They did one.
Yeah.
I've had one of their students do an internship with me.
Yeah.
In the old days when I was
because
still
it's the counter to NJIT, it's kind of.
They're both very talented schools.
Yeah,
they're both
NJIT is good. Yeah.
I think you're right, Dickson. It's about those public-private partnerships.
Because there's your data. Then
that's where you.
Because you've got plant labs in business to develop these metrics. But what do they want to do? They want to sell the metrics. Mm-hmm. They want you to hire them to do that part of the work, and so that you don't have to worry about that. But you know what? I don't want to hire a plant lab all the time, and maybe I do and maybe I don't. And if I don't, where do I go for that information? And from the seat of your pants, you have to do these calculations based on scant data from, let's say, places like University of Arizona or UC Davis, or maybe even the University of British Columbia in Vancouver has some data on this, but for the most part, it still needs to be developed. The Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences is working dare I say, feverishly on all these problems, they're certainly not going to share that data with anybody else until they're ready to commercialize it themselves. The country of Korea, and we've talked about their vertical farm. I visited it. It's in Suwon. It's 3 stories tall. It's an experimental station. It's next to their big seed bank. Again, the metrics are not going to come out of that except for the people that live in Korea. I think they'll share them with their own people, but I don't think they're going to share this with the rest of the world, at least not right away. So we need some feeding of data from these research centers out into the commercial sectors, and what better way to do this than through the university system?
All right, Henry, here's a question.
Okay.
So I have a lot of money. I want to build a vertical farm.
How much money?
Not an issue.
Good second question.
$100 million.
Okay.
Want to build it in Newark. Where do we start?
Well, first you're going to need to look at your market and the prices for the product.
Do we have to know what we want to grow initially?
What you want to grow, exactly. And I think that comes down to the numbers as well, right? So leafy greens are typically what you can grow indoors in a completely controlled environment right now. So you're going to look at the leafy green varieties and the costs. This is going to be, I feel like there's going to be a lot of, this is a tough one. And then you're going to think about the technology you're going to use to grow those crops. Maybe it's technology you have or one you have to acquire, and how good you can do that and at what cost. Then I like to start designing the space itself already with those questions, already answered a little bit. What's the product I'm trying to grow? What are the systems I'm thinking of? Then I just go for it. I think bold and I explore how you would design it in space. I have to do a 3D model. I just use SketchUp, which is a free software. Right. It's incredible what happens when you actually do it yourself and you design the model yourself, and you can explore it. You can walk through it. You can see it. You can think about how workers and machines would interact in that space. And it's through that visually modeling process that then you can optimize. So even if it's a used warehouse, if 100 million, you'd probably, develop your own, or maybe a set of them. Let me see what else I could answer for you. And then you model the numbers. So then you're going to do a full economic analysis of your labor, your fertilizer costs. If you're going to pursue USDA GAP and get food safety certified, you need to know that means you change your water tanks every 2 weeks. That's going to change your fertilizer costs. Electricity, you need to look at that. Then are you going to have somebody do the distribution for you, or are you big enough that you can do distribution on your own? There's so many questions, right? Vertical farms are the food, water, energy nexus embodied in the urban environment, right? So it's an enormous challenge, but that's the starting point. For the vertical farm model I have for Newark, which I would love to see realized, is basically a fast food vertical farm. So as it's direct to customer, so it's designed for the commuters. So imagine you and Dickson, you live in New Jersey as well, right? So you're leaving your house, and instead of bringing flowers to your significant other, you get on your phone and you select a box of a variety of produce from the vertical farm. And on your way, when you go through the tolls at a toll booth, you drive through a very large kind of Sonic style place, and you pick up your box and you bring it home. I would love to disrupt the concept of bringing flowers home and have it be vegetables and fresh product for your family. And kind of buy into that's the marketing element, right? Get into this kind of American convenience element. And then whatever excess you have, if you don't, let's say 60% of your farm belongs to the customers directly, the other 40%, you sell it at wholesale, and you have a distributor come by, and you have to obviously design it so you have great access. I
just thought of a name for your
tell me.
It's great. Drive-through shoot.
Drive-through shoots?
Drive-through shoots.
Sounds bad.
I mean, that's the one
in Newark, it's not going to go.
No, it's perfect. So, Henry,
what do you think of that?
This is great.
I love the disruption part where you have to make it easier for people. Right now,
but it's cheap land off the side of the highways.
You're right.
By the time I'm driving home, I'm exhausted. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to stop anywhere. Right. So if it can be made easier, I'm telling you will get a lot of people, because I'm not the only one.
Tolls. That's what I was thinking. If it was kind of, you slow down for the tolls, if you could connect it somehow, but I don't know how you would do that yet.
I think you have to stop and park, but if it's easy, it could work.
It has to be easy.
So, continuing along these lines of questioning,
maybe a drone to deliver it.
That's definitely something pretty light.
In the future, you won't have to worry about driving. You can just sit in the car and it'll drive for you, and then you can probably prepare it on the way home. But especially if it's a salad. But who serves on your team?
At Blue Planet?
Who
or?
are no. In this $100 million farm, who are the personnel? What are their jobs?
Wow,
Right.
I love this. This is fun.
Come on.
Well, my vision of the future vertical farm, again, I'm focused on the worker experience. Even that concept I did for you was kind of modular.
No, you did it for you, by the way.
Space. Yeah, it's true. I did it for me. But it was modular spaces, and I tried to think about what's the kind of ideal space for one worker, and then how can you get some outdoor space to interact with instead of just indoor LEDs the whole time. So my vision of the vertical farm is that it's mainly vertical farming technicians. Obviously, you have some managers beyond that we can talk about. But imagine if every vertical farming technician gets a space that's theirs. Maybe it's 5,000 square feet. Maybe it's 2,000 square feet, depending on the density that you have it in. And then in that space, they kind of have modular vertical tower systems that they work with, stacked systems. They can experiment, however, with different kinds of growing methods, with the challenge still, like in any business, to still have production. So there's this R&D element that's embedded throughout the operation, because vertical farming development will never end. It will never end. It's begun, and it's always going to need to constantly improve. Totally. So I think any vertical farm that's resilient truly would have this R&D embedded in it as part of its training, as part of its human resources management. So, you imagine a huge vertical farm, with these bays of people that they're responsible for their area, and they have to get production out, but they also have some flexibility to experiment with ways to make it more efficient, ways to make it more sustainable.
It's like working at Merck.
Yeah. And
probably better.
Yeah, you can eat what you produce.
And that's primarily it.
So how many growers do you have?
It totally depends on the layers and the density we're going to have, right?
And where are they going to come from? That's the other place.
Well, that's the next question. That's what I'm kind of focusing on now, which is why I focus most of my consulting with schools now and inspiring young people to not just be excited about the subject, but actually want to pursue it as a business, and that it could be profitable. So we have a couple school engagements now, and we're trying to start this Growing Futures program, and other people are doing similar things.
Yes.
Where we teach youth about vertical farming and indoor farming, hydroponics, and encourage them to pursue entrepreneurship and R&D around it. So hopefully in the next 1 to 2 months, you'll hear about a school in New York that's doing something like that with Blue Planet. And the focus on that is going to be R&D, like build things, make it more efficient, experiment with it, develop at-home units. You could also imagine in the future that the vertical farms are kind of managed by service crews that travel around. So that could be a business of its own.
Farming associations.
Yeah.
Indoor farming association.
Well, yeah.
Why not?
Why not? So there's so many different ways this could go. But you're right. I've also noticed that there's a gap in talent for this industry, for the growers, and not only the growers but the engineers. I get a lot of requests. The least important
part is getting the money. It sounds like, once you have the money, now what do you do?
Right.
And indeed, that's the next big question. What do you do?
Yeah. So do A&M schools need to start training people to do this?
Yeah,
they do. They need to move beyond the typical hydroponic horticulture course, which is very just focused on production. And they need to move into some R&D focus, which would include vertical farming once they actually started looking at it. Yeah, but right now, that's the challenge. It's hard to find growers that are open-minded to experiment with the design.
So we had a war
and still
on
have
cancer.
that production experience. It's very difficult.
Right?
No, there's so few. That's why.
So we had a war on
At some point,
cancer.
it's going to reach a point where there are lots of farms, and then you'll have plenty of people.
A war on poverty.
Yeah.
And now we need a war on food.
War on food? We don't want to fight food. We want a war on hunger.
War on hunger. Using food to fight that war.
So this is very interesting because you're clearly at a point now where this is going to work. It's going to go forward. But people are the limitation, experienced people.
That's right.
These few farms that we spoke with, it was quite clear that, they start very small.
They
And these are people who have some experience, and they learn.
That's right.
And they hire people, horticulturists, basically, who know how to handle plants, but they have to
Which is
learn
why
new
no one
things.
answered Henry's questionnaire when he sent it out, because they invented all this themselves, and they're not going to share that.
Yeah, I think that's a big problem. at this
Come on,
point.
it's a proprietary thing. You figure it out yourself.
Well, I think that's where A&M schools can help a lot. They can have demonstration projects that do it, right, and generate data.
You got it.
I think that's what we need. We need 2,000, 5,000 square foot spaces in schools where they say, okay, this is year one. This is what we produced.
Sure.
And at the same time, they have crews of students and professionals combined that are saying, how can we grow more in that space? How can we use less water? How can we grow different varieties, right? Because we want to.
Sure.
You should do this, Dickson. You should convince a local. What would be a local A&M school who would be in Rutgers? You should go to the dean of the ag school and say, "Look, you're going to be in on the beginning if you do this."
I can help you with the market
you bring
research to justify
Henry with you.
They want to know how many jobs are going to be.
If I had an audience with those kinds of people, I would certainly do it. Because it's hard to get past the door.
Well, you're an academician. You're talking about starting an academic program to fill a need. You take Henry, who's the numbers guy, with you because you don't know numbers
I don't
at
know
all.
Any numbers, no.
And you make a pitch, but you're not asking for money.
No.
You're telling them to start a program,
That's correct.
and you can be the dean.
Well, I don't want to be the dean, but in the book that I wrote on the vertical farm, I have a whole chapter about that.
Really? What's that book called, Dickson?
The Vertical Farm.
You should rewrite it with Henry and put numbers in it this
Feeding the
time.
world in the 21st century.
That would be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we would love to
Version
collaborate
2. You should do version 2 with him.
Yeah, we need Vertical Farm, the Designs book next. That's really what needs to come out next because I think that's a coffee table book that really attracts attention.
Well,
I want to see that book.
We need to attract the attention, absolutely, Dickson. But we also need to get the data and the tools out there. How can people actually develop these projects? How can we make it more open source? It's not going to become exponential technology until we kind of get around these companies that are, rightfully so, closed-minded. But there's going to have to be some open source disruption.
You might say there's something wrong with society when you can go to a bookstore and buy the plans to the Starship Enterprise.
Right.
But you can't buy the plans for a vertical farm. What's wrong with this picture?
Those enterprise plans are meaningless.
I must tell you
they would never work.
Most people think they're real.
They
think the warp drive is okay. But by the way, what did they eat on the Starship Enterprise? Do they have a vertical farm? You bet they do.
You can't go and buy a book of vertical farm plans.
You can't
get them free on the internet.
Where no person has gone before without food. So even the Starship Enterprise needs a food-making system that works, and it's got to be indoors, and it's got to be self-contained.
Hey, you know this thing about going to Mars one way, right? You've heard about that. Are they going to put a vertical farm up there?
If they don't, they're going to starve to death. That's why they're not
going to. Did you read The Martian?
The Martian, I haven't.
You should read it.
Yes,
by Andy Weir.
Okay,
this was a sleeper book. The guy wrote it, and he threw it up for free on Amazon, and it did so well that they said you should charge for this. Now it's a bestseller.
Wow!
It's about a guy who gets left behind on Mars, and he has to, among other things, grow his food.
Oh dear!
You'll love it.
Okay,
you'll love it.
There's a related book to this by Gerald O'Neill, who taught at Princeton at the Institute for Advanced Studies, and it was called Colonies in Space. And it was written in the 1960s. And he talks about this gigantic mile-in-diameter torus, which was stationed about 300 miles up. And if you walk inside of it, it's like Eden. There are waterfalls, and it's spinning at the rate of one gravity's worth of turn, so that you feel at home. Although it doesn't look like you're home because you're looking at the Earth through this gigantic torus, and it's all populated with gardens and beautiful places to live, and it's kind of a fantasy thing. But then he goes into how to build the darn thing. And it's quite an interesting book. It's still available on Amazon, too. So it's probably a companion book to
What's the name of it?
Colonies in Space.
Colonies in Space.
Gerald O'Neill.
By the way, I had an idea for you, Dickson, that might be interesting. It kind of relates to the coffee book and the impact of design and future vision. So Hollywood, right? You've seen Interstellar?
Absolutely.
So Interstellar, the world is basically over. There's this storm that's kind of killing all the crops.
So now,
but you don't see any vertical farms. You don't see any controlled environment agriculture, which would solve the specific problem.
Because they wanted to solve it another way.
I know. But then I started thinking. I said, who consults these Hollywood studios on the future of farming?
No, that's right. I sat with my wife and watched this movie in a theater, and I said,
well, you could do it too.
Where are the vertical farms in that movie? Because you could see they were withering. The Earth's climate had changed so badly that the only crop that would survive was corn.
Right. So vertical farming needs a breakthrough movie, basically.
It needs a breakthrough movie, I think.
And a breakthrough video game called...
Could be too.
No. There's a video game called Farmland, which is very popular among kids. This should be called Urban Farmland. I want to see that video game.
So I think as soon as this Jackson vertical farm goes up, a lot of lot of the
people
Hollywood
will
people
see
go
it.
through Jackson. They're going to see it.
I think it's going to change.
And they're
They're going to get a big idea about this, especially when they go to dinner that night, because they're going to say, you know where this food came from, don't you?
Yeah.
Remember that thing you saw out next to the parking lot where your car is right now?
It's true.
That's where it came from.
It's a matter of time. Yeah.
But it tastes so good. Hydroponic food is supposed to taste so lousy.
I got an idea that we could have a movie, Dickson. You have a vertical farm that infects the world with a virus through its cabbage, hey?
the tomatoes that ate Cleveland, I saw that movie. It was
one of the disgruntled workers puts a virus in the water, it goes into the food supply, and it goes global before they recognize it. We should be more positive on the first movie, right?
Well, yeah, because scientists never get it right in the movies. You know, this is what's wrong with the movies.
Yeah, I mean, or it could be growing the vaccine to
so actually, we talked about this a long time ago. We actually had a podcast which we called Vertical Vaccine Farm.
That's right.
Because we were talking, there is actually an influenza vaccine currently in testing, which is grown in tobacco plants.
Right.
And in 1 square meter of plants, you can grow 20,000 doses of vaccine. This is phenomenal. Because right now, 1 dose of vaccine comes from 1 chicken egg.
Or duck egg.
What?
Or duck egg. Duck eggs are bigger. No, they're bigger.
They don't use duck eggs. They're not inbred. Chicken eggs is what they use.
Okay.
Anyway, and so we talked about having a whole building.
So that's another example of how it can be part of the resilient city of the future.
Yeah,
right? It's not just growing food; it's growing. The Association of Vertical Farming, we call that grow to heal. We give every single vertical farm a categorization for its purpose. Grow to wholesale, grow to develop would be an R&D one. In this case, grow
biofuels.
Yeah,
and that's a carbon neutral type of thing. So, there's a lot of possibilities. No question.
So, Henry, where are you going to be in 5 years?
Older.
That's tough to ask a young guy like him, right?
It's tough.
Because you can't look so far ahead. I know where I'm going to be.
Would you like to be in 5 years?
It's not a place, right? For me, I move around a lot. That's tough. It's tough to
You're allowed to come back and answer that question.
Yeah. I mean, I would really love to have maybe some goals. I'd really love to have a thriving job training program for youth that gets them involved in this. I would really love to have a couple vertical farms that I've helped to project manage, and I would really like for Agritecture to be more than just a news resource. But I would love it for it to be a kind of a placement agency for jobs, a place for design competitions, a platform for businesses and individuals to communicate with each other on the subject. Yeah, I mean, I would really like to kind of have my own business at that point. That's what I would like to have.
So maybe you could be, in the design world, they would say a complementary color to the company that you currently work with. So instead of Blue Planet, you could be the Green Planet. So you're the Blue and Green Planet. Because that's the colors that everyone recognizes as a healthy environment, right? So blue-green is I picked that color too.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's really a wonderful job with a great team, and I get to do the consulting that I want on urban agriculture and learn primarily, which is my main. My favorite thing to do is to learn about the subject and the various companies and people involved in it.
Yeah, to see how many new people, how many young new people catch this idea and just can't get it out of their heads. They just have to do it. It's just been very inspirational for me, and I'm sure for my former students as well.
Yeah, so I get a lot of questions about...
So I don't consider you one of my former students right now. I consider you my future educator because you know a lot more than I do about this now because you've done much more research and traveling than I've done. And I don't speak as many languages as you do either. So I look forward to learning more about your future through your website, through your activities, through... perhaps a book that you want to write on this subject too. That would be a great idea, by the way. So I love your website.
I should collaborate on a book.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good. Very good.
I have some email here. You want to answer them?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's try.
Yeah, these are actually right up Henry's alley. His first one's from Richard. Not exactly a podcast-related email, more to do with vertical farming. I've spent the last few months designing an LED-based lighting system targeted at saltwater and coral aquariums, needing to have constant output compensating for aging, but specific output spectrum. I wonder if this would be of any use in vertical farming. I can see that it might be useful in extending day length and in the case of some plants, producing the correct light spectrum to trigger flowering. This might be useful in growing crops outside the normal zone, for example, simulating equatorial sunlight that vanilla orchids, for example, and other things require. Being LED and liquid cooled gives advantages of high efficiency and long life, as well as being able to reuse or remove waste heat. With day extension, this may well be possible using solar power and the correct sort of battery with no external energy input. I just wondered, is this of any interest? If so, I'd be happy to work towards a more sustainable future. The vertical farming concept being of interest to me as a solution to solving future food issues.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe we should refer them to Illumintex and see what happens, because we now know a lot of the manufacturers for these LED grow lights, and to apply it to a coral reef, that's a very interesting concept.
I don't know if you could go from a saltwater aquarium to vertical farming, but maybe some of the things that you learn could be applied.
That's what I was thinking as well.
Sure.
Because again, I'm not sure what additional inputs you're doing to make it function in that saltwater environment. But certainly you see people getting involved in technologies that could apply to vertical farming and kind of happening in silos separate from it. So certainly connect with other LED manufacturers or startup companies.
Exactly.
Do the research on LEDs for horticulture and see how your product fits.
Especially maybe if you wanted to grow seaweed as a bioproduct, you'd probably have to use LEDs underwater.
Would love to. Do you think that is a possibility?
So that's a very unusual form of aquaculture.
Do people do that already?
They grow algae.
In bags.
But I've never seen things like brown or green seaweeds being grown, like kelp, for instance, or all those seaweeds that they use in sushi, for instance. I haven't seen that, but I know that they make a lot of food items out of it. And it's very healthy for you because it's extremely green and rich in vitamins, so it wouldn't be bad.
Do you like seaweed?
I love seaweed.
So here's a cool story.
It's so good.
People in Asian countries who eat a lot of seaweed, they have bacteria in their guts that digest it because we don't. They've acquired them from the seaweed. So just by eating it, puts the right bacteria in your gut to digest it. So if you have a diet of seaweed, you will eventually acquire these same bacteria. It's very cool.
Very cool.
Wow.
You are what you eat. All right, next one's from Bill. It seems to me that a research experiment to create a vertical farm with a portion that created nitrogenous and carbon dioxide waste partnered with a plant portion that used the nitrogen and CO2 would be a good idea. Nitrogen is one of the main costs of plant growth, as well as potassium and assorted trace elements, and it is one of the major waste products of animal production. Vertical farms attain near-perfect control of aphids and other plant pests with exclusionary methods that create a fully organic crop. Similarly, shrimp and fish farms are plagued by parasites and viruses and would also be amenable to an exclusionary method of pest control. So each crop would start off with pest and pathogen-free eggs, seeds, shoots, and by feeding only sterile food and nutrients could achieve a well-integrated system. Crops and animals can start off at the same stage, and as each grew, the wastes of each would feed the other.
Right.
Some experimentation would determine the sustainable load of each crop so they matched their mutual use of waste. In addition, the building could have hundreds of tanks and plan flats with crops. I guess that's plant flats with crops starting weekly in various tanks, flats, and being harvested weekly as maturity occurred. I'm sure supplemental nutrients would be needed, as it would be impossible for a total match, especially for various conserved minerals, which would be needed by all things grown. As long as a sterile perimeter was maintained and sterile eggs, seeds, shoots were used, along with well-trained people, that's the problem, as we've said, and sterilized feed traced elements were provided, such a place could stay contaminant-free for a long time, although there needs to be a method of bulkhead isolation as on a ship, just in case a contaminating event occurred, so the bulkheads could be sealed to prevent spread.
Look at that.
It's comprehensive.
It's a very long email.
It's not over. Back in 1960, I worked as a student at a summer job at Connaught Labs in Toronto, now Sanofi Pasteur, and they were responsible for World War II penicillin bulk production in very large fermentation vessels. At startup, they made 42 consecutive 1,000-gallon batches that became contaminated with competing organisms before they were able to create contamination-free product. They went through a number of types of contamination and eliminated them, but a very persistent problem was eventually traced to channeling in the filters used, and these channels allow traces of competing organisms to enter. A batch was watched with care, and as soon as a contaminant was detected, dumping and sterilization took place, as they were under great pressure to produce penicillin due to war injuries. Penicillin saved many lives on the front. Free ocean fish farms and land-based tanks and ponds are quite low in cost for fish and shrimp, but do have problems of assorted contamination occurring, and the methods used to kill sea lice, etc., prevent the organic label from being attached. It might be possible for an integrated vertical plant fish farm I described to prosper. I think it is worth exploring. In fact, they may have them out there now. I have not seen them on the web, though.
Well, I don't know what you want to say about this, Henry, but I will at least tell this very knowledgeable listener to consult with John Edel.
How do you spell that?
Plant, Edel.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He's the co-director of
Is it Chicago?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's called The Plant, and he specializes in ecological integration of aquaculture with hydroponics, and he knows all about the ratios of nitrogen and waste products that are necessary to optimize the growth for the plants, and then he takes some of those plants and feeds them back to the fish so that he gets a complete internal cycle going. So that's the one I know that's been studied the best, but maybe you, Henry, know some others.
No, I think the plant is a good one, and I'm certainly, that's very exciting to pursue that kind of closed loop. That's really the ecological, sustainable vertical farm. At UBC Farm, I know they are working on something small scale like that, where it's mushrooms and fish and various ecosystems that work together. But I think it's in the early stages.
And Growing Power out in Milwaukee has plans for a 5-story vertical farm. I don't know how far along they are because they keep publishing newer versions of those wonderful 5 stories. I would love to see the ground actually with a hole in it and say that's what we're building now. But they've already got these closed-loop agricultural systems going inside of a single greenhouse-like facility. And I've had the pleasure of visiting that facility at some time before this. Also, I must mention that the greenhouse in Korea by the Rural Development Authority has a aquaponics component to that as well. So a lot of people are looking at this as closed loop. This is a microcosm of the earth, and how can we make it behave sustainably? And that harkens back to a lot of the things that you were talking about before, Henry.
So Sandra writes with suggestions for future guests. Let's see if you know these guys. Stephen Ritz, Green Bronx Machine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Green Bronx Machine is an education-focused, entrepreneurial-focused group. It's kind of doing the job training we were talking about.
I've seen his YouTube.
Yeah, he's a very charismatic.
Very dynamic person.
Okay, and Tim Blank, Future Growing.
Know him very well.
Yeah?
Yeah, we've partied together.
You don't party.
I did with Tim. In fact, we both received awards from Plantagon, as I recall.
They're vertical aeroponic towers.
That's right.
Is he local?
He's the one that worked at Epcot before he developed these tower gardens.
Shout out
that Bell Book and Candle now uses.
Right.
All right. Bill writes, Dickson, how do various places levy realty taxes on farms located in industrial buildings that are not abandoned?
They're not abandoned? Well, I think there are so many abandoned ones. If I had to fill those up first, I would do that. So I don't know any examples of mixed-use warehouse buildings where a vertical farm is operational in portions of an already operational warehouse facility. So maybe you do.
I'm trying to understand the question. He's asking about the taxes.
How do various places levy realty taxes on farms located in industrial buildings that are not abandoned?
I don't.
Yeah, I don't know if there's enough cases.
Yeah,
I may not be any. As far I don't know of any.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay.
The only ones we're familiar with are the ones we hear about because they're successful, and therefore they go online, and therefore we get their examples to champion, so to speak. These are abandoned, buildings that were made by Walmart or Kmart or a whole bunch of other warehousers that what do they call them? The big square box industry?
Big box stores, right?
Yeah, and so I don't know any that would say, "Oh, come on in and establish a vertical farm. You can have a third of the building over there."
Yeah.
But then, how indeed would you share the tax burden?
Yeah, I mean, I could I could look it up. I do know one real
Don't
estate
have a
developer
clue.
in Connecticut that was open to having some of the space used for vertical farming. It was a great location. You can find it on Agritecture under jobs as well. That's the opportunity there. But it's 2 hours from New York, 2 hours from Boston,
Right.
Right near the train station.
Right.
And I think that the city itself up there or the town is doing some kind of tax incentive if your company is considered green.
Sure. So Gotham Greens is actually on the rooftop
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Whole Foods. So maybe they've worked out a deal together to split the real estate taxes and stuff like this. I don't know the details there.
It's a good
or
question.
whether they'd even
good
share
question.
that knowledge.
Carol writes, I am thoroughly enjoying your podcasts. Although I'm retired, I do quite a few lectures under the Master Gardener umbrella of the University of Tennessee. My most requested subject seems to be container gardening of vegetables. I'm about to embark on growing a small amount of veggies indoors as soon as construction is complete on my new sunroom. My first instinct is to use my favorite planting medium of 1/3 each compost, perlite, and peat moss. Although your discussions are heavy on lighting concerns, I don't remember hearing you address soil mixtures. I'd love your advice on such. By the way, due to my fairly large store of incandescent light bulbs, I will try using them for heat in this home edition, certainly with a backup system.
Yeah.
It's obvious that the windows will emit sufficient heat during most days and at night. A low temperature of 50 will probably be sufficient. May I have your opinion on both factors, night temperatures and soil makeup, please? And oh yes, is it okay to keep the lights on the plants 24/7? Keep up the great work. You really do a fine job of personal interaction while giving us interesting and useful information in a manner that makes this thought exciting and possible. Blessings to you both.
And to the third person in the room.
So we don't talk about dirt. we talk about water.
No, I
right?
would start with saying if you could apply a hydroponic or a drip situation to the moss and to the, let's say, vermiculite, if you could use that as a solid matrix, or even coconut husks have been ground up and used as a solid matrix, but it has no nutritional value whatsoever. The most common one used in greenhouse operations now, I think, is volcanic soil. Which isn't really soil, it's hardened magma from the center of the earth. It does have mineral capacity, but I think it's not solubilized when it's hydrated. So you might want to consider going to a total hydroponic drip situation. And there are tons of examples. Hydrostackers is the one that originally comes to mind, but there are lots of other commercially viable alternatives for that. The plant is fooled into thinking it's in soil. It taps roots down into this solid matrix. As long as the nutrients that you're putting into the soil, in quotes, has enough micronutrients to satisfy the needs of the plant, you're in business. So I think I would start with that one rather than try soil, because soil has got lots of things in it that you might not want in eventually, like bugs that you can't control.
Right.
And sure, it has worms and stuff. Those are good for the plants, but it might also have some plant pathogens that you might discover too late to actually be able to do something about. So that's my own opinion. Lighting. LEDs, I think LEDs are perfect.
But she's going to use her incandescents.
I know. You're going to find soon, the electric bills are very high.
Can she leave them on
Very
24/7? Is that okay?
She could. But
For the plants, don't mind, right?
Plants like a 12-hour cycle mostly.
Yeah, I think 12 to, I'm not a lighting expert or a substrate expert, so there's
we
other people can answer questions, but I think 12 to 16 hours
Right.
is what
Because
you
she
want
wants
to
to
look at.
keep.
More
She
than
wants
that,
to
the
use it
plants
for
and
heating the room, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. I would use it more to
if
heat than I
it's-
would to make the plants grow, actually.
Right. I mean, if it's a sunroom, then try and change the schedule a bit and maybe shade it when the day gets colder.
But it's Tennessee, remember? So they have a northern sunlight regimen. I think LEDs on a 12-hour cycle would be perfect for this one. And they're very efficient, and they don't generate a lot of heat, so you could use your incandescent bulbs to generate the heat, and you could use your LED bulbs to generate the proper wavelengths.
Yeah, and for the substrate, I've heard about coconut coir, like Dickson said, from small-scale growers. They like it, sustainable mostly, and then expanded clay, if you really want to go into something reusable, you need to ask your question, do you want a substrate that's reusable, or do you want something that you're going to have to just get rid of?
Right, okay.
So, yeah.
And how would a Blue Planet handle the micro bubble aspect of getting the proper oxygen level to the root systems?
Yeah, well, that's a whole other thing, but we have a water-driven unit that runs off 5 psi and then creates a vortex that draws in fresh air and then shears that air vortex into microscopic and nano-sized bubbles. So, for a small-scale grower, it could work because you just need a submersible pump and then you have the air line hanging out. But for a small scale system, you can also use an air stone just to clean it a bit more often and save some costs.
Right. And there are lots of other commercial. You mentioned Tim Blank. The Tower Garden units are for sale.
Yeah,
it's a tub of nutrients with an under submersible pump and a column that you attach these plants to, and then their root systems grow inside, and it's an aeroponic fed system. And you could look them up online and see if that's something that you might want to
cool.
own.
Yeah. All right, one more. Yep. You'll love this. This is from Andreas. Dear gentlemen, I'm studying.
I like it right away.
I'm studying horticulture at Humboldt University in Berlin. I focus on hydroponic and aquaponic cultivation methods and follow your podcast with great interest. My favorite, the interview with Paul Hardy. Please allow me to address the following questions to you.
Uh-oh.
1. With regard to lighting, almost everyone is focusing on LED, OLED. However, I read that sulfur plasma lamps are even more advantageous because their radiation spectrum would be closer to par compared to LED, and that they would be more cost effective. What is your experience on this topic?
Neither one of us has any experience on it, but I've heard a lot of data from the experts, and the experts all opt eventually, due to efficiency of electricity, for the LEDs. I know that the sodium light, you have to have a water jacket around these to keep the heat down.
The sulfur plasmas, you mean?
Yeah, it generates a lot of heat. Although it's at the proper wavelengths, it's not potentially dangerous. It's just very expensive. Whereas if you use the LED lights of today, especially when we interviewed the group at Lumitex.
Yeah, I mean they can do great stuff with the spectrum. Yeah,
for going to that. And by the way, Paul Hardy has recently installed an enormous amount of Lumitex lighting because of the reasonableness of it. It's economically viable. So that would be. I don't know anything about the lighting from sodium emitted lights as to whether they're. You get more growth. Maybe that would make up if you're looking for.
Do you know about this sulfur plasma lamp?
Ja, über diese Technologie weiß ich überhaupt nicht.
Nice.
Also,
I knew what he's saying, but I'm not.
No, I'm for me as somebody who's trying to offer advice on the subject, I would like to see more white papers and kind of consumer reports comparing the LED lights, the various lighting options. Right now, I think it's very much a marketing game. Personally, I think it's very difficult.
Yeah, I agree.
You see, what I take is I see again companies changing their lighting systems, whether it's Green Spirit Farms and Farm Tier 2 Lumitex. That's a sign of something that you can say that offers some legitimacy to the product. But I would like to see more. So I don't know about that lighting personally, and I can't speak.
Sulfur lamp is it's driven by sulfur plasma excited by microwave radiation. It's a type of plasma lamp developed in the 1990s. Yeah. It was a commercial failure by the late 1990s, but they are now being manufactured again for commercial use.
Interesting.
Well, maybe we could consult with our good friend down at the University of Arizona, Gene Giacomelli, he's had some experience with those as well as with LEDs. So perhaps we'll try to get an answer for you in the near future.
Number 2, growing plants exclusively under artificial light, one can achieve growth advantages. What happens if you combine natural light with artificial light? Don't you risk to lose the growth advantages compared to cultivation under entirely artificial light?
I think you need to balance the growth advantages with the energy savings, right? So if you're mixing ambient light with artificial light, then you could get significant energy savings. But you have to design that whole lighting schedule and plan the farm around it. Also, you have to consider that the plants reach for the light. So, depending on how the facade or the structure is designed, the plants will reach for the artificial light or the natural light.
That's right.
Which will affect the consistency of your product.
Exactly. So the scheme that I'm most familiar with for the greenhouse operation, at least, is, Gotham Greens. They're on the roof of Whole Foods. They're totally transparent in terms of the light source, and they use sunlight only. They don't grow any plants without sunlight, okay? If you go to Japan, however, and you look at the plant factory situation, about half of them use natural sunlight. The other half are totally enclosed inside and use LED lights. which produce more, which produce better, which produce, more nutritious, more flowering, more this, more that. We don't know the answers. I know who does, but they're not sharing them, and that's Plant Lab, because they've done all those experiments, but they're not releasing that data because they did the experiments and they own the results, and they're commercializing. So again, this goes right back to the academic situation that we just alluded to.
Yep.
I'd love to see UC Davis's take on this, because they have a lighting laboratory. And they have a big group out there that's interested in these questions. So whether that data exists or not, I don't know.
MIT City Farm is testing this a bit. Wigan, UTC out of the UK is another university that's testing vertical farm with ambient lighting.
In Holland. Wageningen University.
Yeah, Wageningen.
However you pronounce that.
I like the way you do
please. That's not correcting me. That's just telling me how to do it.
But we do need to know more about the balance between artificial light and ambient light in vertical farms, because that's how we're going to make use of these facade spaces. That's how we're going to integrate into structures.
Sure.
But it's
one of the interesting talks. I'm going to just resurp it. No. Let's scratch this. I'm going to revisit the data, because I heard it in Berlin about 2 years ago now. One of the German scientists from the former East Germany presented a paper at this meeting that I was at, where he imitated the density of light, the intensity and density of light, with a 3-filament light bulb. And each filament emitted light at a different wavelength. And he imitated with his hands the way the sun comes up, it asymptotes at noon, and then it goes back down again.
Not asymptote, it just... I think it's called apogee, not asymptote. Asymptote is when you're getting close to a line, but you never quite approach it.
Right? I knew that was what I said wrong, but I'm sorry.
So
he filled with malaprops.
He was mimicking.
What he did was he actually mimicked the sunrise, noon, and sunset with the filaments. And then, of course, they asked him the $64 million question, a euro question in this case, and that is, at what wavelength did they grow better? Okay. And so he said, well, follow my hands. This is with sunlight, and this is with my 3-filament bulb, and here I go. And so he raised his hands, and there was no difference in the growth rate of the plants in sunlight or the plants with his light bulb. So he got identical growth rates. And then they said, well, doing it your way with the 3-filament bulb that's on a rheostat, it gives off very low light during the morning, very intense light at noon, and very low light again when the sun sets. How much energy did you save doing that? Over a conventional bulb that you walk in and throw the lights on and then turn the lights off when you go home, how much energy difference did you save? He says, I'm glad you asked that, Frage. That was German for question. And he said 50%. And you could hear the audience actually gasp when he said it. 50%, simply by imitating the circle of the sun through the sky. And the intensity of the light was less in the beginning and less at the end, but he got the same growth rate as if he had left the lights on and turned them back off. So, of course, that's the way the plants grow outside. They've adjusted their growth rate based on the incident rays of the sun. So if you can imitate that indoors, so much the better. Now, he didn't say how much this light bulb cost. I don't think it was for sale. I think this was a research tool. But you can imagine in the near future, he's going to commercialize this somehow. And that was at a university, by the way. So that was sort of a sharing of information that would come out of such a situation like that.
All right, next. What about profitability of vegetables cultivated in vertical farms compared to ones traditionally cultivated and sold in normal supermarkets?
If you're a California farmer, I have a great answer for you. You don't have any vegetables this year because the drought eliminated them.
I remember one of our guests mentioned the huge difference in the amount of water you need for soil versus...
no question.
Enormous.
It's 70% more in soil than it is out.
A lot of farmers aren't charged necessarily for the water, so
Soon
the cost doesn't translate. I think you're looking at 20 to 50 cents per head of lettuce, difference. So there is an increase right now. The energy cost to grow completely indoors is significant, and that's been the limiting factor that we are just now beginning to wrangle with. But you can market that. You can market that product. You can market it as pesticide free, right? You can create a completely enclosed environment where you have no pesticides on it. Yeah. I'd be willing to pay 20 cents more, 50 cents more for pesticide free, or local, right? Knowing how local it is. And as you said, the water savings, the challenge is how do we communicate to the consumer that value? Do we pretend like it's just a regular product and they don't actually know it comes from a vertical farm and kind of slip it in like this is just and focus on the cost competitiveness, or do you market it and try and find new labeling? That's what we'll see when we see how these vertical farming companies grow and how they market their products to the wider audience.
And another part to that answer is it depends on which country you're doing this in. Like if you take Japan, for instance, which has to manufacture food this way because nobody's going to eat soil-based agriculture now in Japan. They're not going to eat it because they know there's a risk that it might be contaminated with radioactivity. Yeah. So the government has to underwrite this whole process. And however you can get it done, we'll just have to pay for it through collecting of taxes, and that's how it's going to come back out again. So you'll never know the answer to the question, except that they'll still be eating healthy produce that's sustainable throughout the whole year.
On one hand, we should take into consideration low cost, moderate yields, and low prices of traditionally cultivated field-grown crops. On the other hand, we can achieve better yields, higher efficiency, and more competitive prices of organically produced crops, but also have to bear much higher costs, depreciation for the building, technical facilities, operational costs, in particular energy. Do you have any information on the profitability of vertical farms versus traditional farms?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people want to know that. And, as somebody who does like to share the information, I mean, I invite you to look at Mirai as a model, MIRAI, as a plant factory model of Japan. As a public company, they do have some economic analysis data out there. So their payback for a vertical farm, one of their module vertical farms, which I believe is 14,000 square feet total building size. I think it's not a great payback. It's like a 10, 11-year payback. So, I think there's still a lot of work to be done, but still, they have 14 locations. So I don't think they're doing that badly.
So to get the biggest laugh you'll ever get out of a question, go up to any dirt farmer and ask them how much profit they made last year.
Yeah, right.
And ask them how many good years they've had in the last 20. And there were green markets all over New York City. And of course, I get a wonderful opportunity to talk with these people. And there's a bunch of them up in New York State, just north of New Jersey, New York border, up in a place called Warwick. And it's called Black Earth. And it's a drained series of swamps that have been converted to, it used to be onion farms and then celery farms, and then now it's mixed grocers. And they come down over to New York City and they sell their goods every late summer and early fall. And you talk to these people and you say, these are fantastic produce you've got here. I mean, I have never seen such large shallots in my entire life. I thought there was an onion in it. No, that's a shallot. The darn thing was as big as a softball. And it was fantastic. They had a great year for this year, right? And I said, let me ask you that. How many years out of 20 do you think have been a profitable year where you got enough yield to make money, but not too much yield to flood the market so the profit for everybody goes down? So it has to be a delicate balance. And the guy just looked at me and he said, maybe 3 out of 20 years. So farming outdoors is not a business model. I don't care who says it. It is not a business model. And the people don't farm outdoors for business purposes. They farm because they love to farm. And every one of those said, why do you do it? He says, I just love to do it. My father did it. My grandfather did it. And I'm doing it. And my kids are going to do it for as long as they can. What is the biggest impediment for the kids who will do it as long as they can? Climate change. We've got climate change issues that are irrevocable over the next 100 years. And all of this farming will disappear. And other farming will come in, perhaps, but not the farming that you're used to. So the only way to remain constant and sustainable is to control the environment. And obviously the only way to do that is to do it indoors. So that's the big pitch. That's my answer to these nebulous questions, because you really can't give a direct cost answer to this question. Is it more profitable indoors or outdoors?
We have no choice.
Unfortunately, that's what I'm saying. So if we have no choice, we should develop it now and make it profitable in the future. It may not be now, but if we don't start it, it'll never be profitable. How's that?
Yeah. And I agree with that completely. We can do better, so we need to learn how to do better. And that's the vertical farming movement.
So in the beginning of this country's future, just after the American Revolution, back in the 1800s, they established 2 schools, an IT school and an ag school in every single state. Every state has an ag and an IT school. Why don't we empower those schools to take this idea forward? That's my big pitch.
It's your job. You have to do it.
Well, I'm doing my job as we speak because people are listening as I'm talking.
Yeah, but you got to go talk to the dean of the ag school.
Tell me about that. I've given talks at various academic institutions, and they
do
listen.
Make a proposal.
They do listen.
Here's what you need to do. They'll listen to you, Dickson.
Read my book.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just going to finish up, Andreas. Thank you very much in advance for any help on these matters, and please do continue your podcasts.
Well, we've just added to the confusion, unfortunately.
No, I think your message is quite clear. That whatever the financial considerations are, we really don't have a choice. We need to do this.
I do feel the urgency for that. I think that we have to be acting now as we're speaking.
I mean, a diversity of solutions to feed the future.
Let industrial evolution go. Whoever wins, that's fine. Share that result.
Change is always slow, Dickson. You know that.
Not necessarily.
At first, but exponential technology.
I mean, this is clearly accelerating because when I first met you and you were talking about this, this was nothing.
Yeah.
There's going to be a vertical farm, vertical farm.
That's right.
All right, you can find this podcast, Urban Agriculture, at iTunes and also at urbanag.ws. And we love answering your questions, right, Dickson?
We love trying, that's for sure.
Dickson does a good job. You can send them to urbanag, one word, at urbanag.ws. I want to thank our guest today for coming back to Columbia, Henry Gordon Smith. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vince. Thank you, Dickson.
That was great.
Come back sometime.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure.
When you learn more.
Sure, absolutely.
And Dickson Despommier can be found at verticalfarm.com. Thank you, Dickson.
You're welcome, Vincent.
I'm Vincent Racaniello. You can find me at virology.ws. The music you hear on Urban Agriculture is performed by John Harrison with the Wichita State University Chamber Players and also by Ronald Jenkins. You can find his work at ronaldjenkins.com. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time on Urban Agriculture.
See you upstairs at the Vertical Farm.
Oh, you will?
You bet.